So tonight, it was a project I was going to start, or actually started a couple, back when Obi-Wan, the series, was on Disney Plus. And I went through great lengths to buy one of these.
Air gun.
Yeah, it's an air gun. It's a pellet gun. And that's the base for Obi-Wan's blaster pistol in the Obi-Wan series. I went all the way up to the point where I found one that was not in working condition, which is all I need. I don't need one that actually works and shoots. What I needed was the actual gun itself, and I could not get one. I found one for 140 pounds, which I was more than happy to pay for, but the laws in Britain are difficult. I'd have to hire a gun broker to buy the gun, then fill out all the paperwork, do the permits, and then have it shipped here. And that was going to cost about $600. So I asked him, can you just part a gun out to me? Sell me the frame. So what they have are what's called controlled, I think they're called controlled parts. So any pressure bearing part of a firearm / pellet gun in England is considered a firearm. Unlike here in the United States, the receiver only is considered the firearm. You can have barrels, you can have magazines, you can have all the pieces of a gun and not have a gun unless you have the receiver. The receiver is the only part that's really a gun. All the components of the gun, the frame, everything is considered a gun. The grips are not considered a gun. So the only thing that I could get for that pellet gun were grips. So here's the grips I got right here. They are a replacement set of grips. They're replica grips. They're casts of originals. I bought them through a gunsmith. So in the process of doing these, he knew that eventually the new old stock of these Webley grips was going to run out. So he took it upon himself to create his own for the restoration work that he does, and he sold me a set. So that is basically that is the frame of Obi-Wan Kenobi's blaster pistol from the Kenobi series. And I have got a set of grips. So if you remember in last week's discussion, when you have a photograph, or you need to scale from a photograph or a screen capture, you need some sort of reference, some sort of, hopefully something in the photo or a piece on the prop, a recognizable piece that you know what the size is. Or if you're scaling something larger, like talking about scaling an old warship, and we had no real good frame of reference, and I looked right in the middle of the picture, there's a guardrail right there, or a handrail. Let's figure out what the average height or the standard height of a handrail is. And we did that. And from there, we kind of could extrapolate some sizes. For this particular project, I have the grips. So I can sit right here and measure the grip with my calipers here. I can measure their length, I can measure the width, and I can use all these measurements to scale that photograph. So we do have the issue of parallax. What we're going to do tonight is I'm going to give you my formula, and it's the formula anyone else uses to scale a photograph. And on top of that, we're also going to talk about sources. There are places, there's tricks, not really tricks, but there's places you should look for photos, not just on screen grabs. Screen grabs are great, like the Obi-Wan blaster. There's really not too many other sources I can find right now for that blaster. It hasn't had a chance to do the Comic-Con circuit. There's not been a celebration where they've got an Obi-Wan zone set up, at least not that I know of, and I haven't seen any photos from any of those yet. But a great reference if you're scaling or reproducing any props from The Mandalorian is the last celebration. They had a whole Mandalorian zone, and they're if you go online, you can find hundreds of photos that people have taken and documented for or of a lot of those props. Parts of Star Wars has a good write-up on the blaster. See, now, I knew the blaster, I knew what the Mando's blaster was prior to, I knew what it was, its base was, prior to the Mandalorian
Yes, you were
popping up. I was so excited. I was like, oh, my stupid gun knowledge has come into, whatever. But anyway, here's one thing. It's also important to have as many reference photos as you possibly can. This is a Jeff failing, and it's also a few other people that do this. They'll bring photos and reference stuff to me that turn out to be fan-made or replicas.
Oh, yeah, that's a pain in the ass on my current project.
So whenever you go search the web, the first thing you have to do is start searching through mountains and mountains and mountains of other people's creations and projects. And some of them are really good, and I'm not saying they're not wrong, and I'm not saying they're not accurate. I'm just saying is I need better evidence I need more source proof than someone else's creation to put something together. Multiple photos is a must. For me, my favorite place to find them are auction houses. Number one, since I do a lot of blasters and a lot of Star Wars, a majority, I would say 80% of Star Wars blasters are based on real guns. Identifying the real gun and then going and finding an auction house. This was at an auction house, and I have there are probably 15 or 20 photos of this particular pellet gun in the auction house. This side, the other side, top, bottom, close-ups of the front, close-ups of the back, close-ups all over. With those photos, that really helps you a lot in taking your measurements and using the formula we're going to talk about here in a second, and using that formula from one end of the prop to the other, and using areas with like the Parallax. Now, if you saw the Parallax, it was put up a couple times. For people not paying attention, here's Parallax.
Does that include us?
Yes.
Now, keep in mind, he's doing it the old school way. The new school way is to throw it into CAD and measure it from there.
So, yes. Now, we're going to talk about new school stuff later on. Next week, we will. But this week, we're talking about the old school. Now, I will tell you how old school I am. I remember pausing VHS cassette and putting a piece of paper up against and tracing the shape of a prop, so I could take it into the wood, take it into the garage, and create that shape out of wood, and then start connecting all the. Yeah, I've been doing this all my life. I have done this on the original Star Trek television show. I've done this on Star Trek The Next Generation for a phaser, and I can't remember what phaser it was. It may have been, is it the Cardassians that had the brown, lumpy, big-looking things?
Are you talking about the Disruptor from the Klingons?
No, it wasn't the Klingons. It was a Cardassian when I tried to rip.
Well, brown and lumpy says Klingon.
No, Klingons are pointy.
Have little tubes on
Yeah,
it looks kind of like a dildo.
Cardassians kind of look more like a Buck Rogers blaster, I think. I've done this more than once. I've done it for helmets. I've done it for guns, blasters. I've done it for knives. So if it's a real world item, you can find it in an auction house. You can literally find them in an auction house, and tons of great reference photos. And on top of all that, sometimes they'll even have a tape measure, like on the bottom of the photograph. The next best place to find stuff are movie auctions. Movie auctions will actually have the best photographs of a real used prop because they're selling it. So you need to see all the detail and all the stuff. And what's good if it's like, if it's, a good prop house, movie prop house, they have already authenticated the item. You already know what you're seeing is the real deal. And they'll tell you, is it a stunt? Is it a hero prop? Is it a stunt prop? Is it a holster stuffer? Is it a background character? Prop of all props is always the hero prop. The one that's the close-up, that gets the close-up shots. A hero prop also might be the one that's actually a real true firearm and will fire blanks and have a poof of smoke and flame come out the barrel. That's true for Star Wars. Han Solo's DL-44, A New Hope, and actually all of them were their hero versions of them, and there were stunt versions, and the stunt versions were also kind of like their holster stuffers. The stunt versions were lightweight, and you could also stuff it in the holster, and it didn't pull Harrison Ford's gun belt off.
Well, the shots coming out of it, the amount of flame coming out of it, was how they ended up with the Thompson as the base for the pulse rifle for Alien.
Yeah, that's actually true. And plus, here's another thing. Certain guns work better as a blank firing gun as not. And it's due to the fact that Thompson, the Sterling submachine gun, and a few others, and a lot of others, even the broom handle Mauser pistol, they're all blowbacks. They need a certain amount of propellant charge to cycle forward.
Overgassed.
Yeah. If they don't have it properly set up, and they can lighten the springs to make them cycle under a lower load, which is actually very easy to do on a lot of these guns.
Can also restrict the barrel.
Actually, lots of times they'll stretch the coils and then clip. Some of these prop making / gunsmiths, they know how to tune these blank firing guns to fire full automatic with very few problems. But anyway, let's get to the formula. So, okay, recap real quick. Internet searches, make sure it's not someone else's work. It's not a replica or fan-made item. 2, my favorite place to find them, if it's a real-world item like a gun auction houses. Like I said, those are one of the best places to go. For props, if you can't find a good screen capture or anything like that, check the auction houses. There are auctions, and a lot of the auction houses, when they throw up a catalog for a particular auction, they'll end up being stored in an inventory that you can still go back and look at in the past. So you can go back and look a couple years back and say, oh, yeah, you remember they had that whole run of Star Wars helmets and, from A New Hope and all this stuff. You can go back and look at that auction. Those photos still exist and are still out there most of the time. As soon as I find them, I take screen grabs or right click and copy those photos, because every one of my computers that I send any real time with have full folders just full of reference photos. So anyway, here we go. We're going to get down to the formula. So what we're going to do is, formula is your reference divided by the measurement from the pick equals your key. So what that means is, I am going to first measure the grip. What we're going to do is we're going to measure from this point to the bottom of the grip. I've done this already. I've actually created, and it's a good idea, taking an area, that's why I folded this in half, because it only has the back half of this photo has the grip assembly on it. So I make a set of master measurements right here, so I can refer to those when I measure on my actual photograph. I've made a measurements, and I'm going to use inches and decimal point. I've measured the photo, so the front edge of the left top edge all the way to the bottom left edge on the actual grip itself is 3.95 inches. The left top and the left bottom, it is 3.95 inches. On the photograph is actually pretty close to the actual size of the gun. It's 3.67. So you take the reference, which is the grip, and divide that by the measurement on the picture. And in this particular instance, it equals 1.05, and that will be your key. Any measurement now on your picture will be multiplied by 1.05, and that will give you the scaled up plus or minus 10% of what it actually is. And I've done some comparisons because of Parallax. I wanted to see what the differences on Parallax was to the back side of the grip. So the top right and the bottom right I measured, and it was 3.1 inches. On the picture, it's 2.98 inches. And when you do the math on that, do the scaling, the reference divided by the measurement, it's 1.04. So already, with just the difference between that to going out to the right, the outside, you're getting a little bit of a a different measurement. The more measurements you can take of your reference piece to help nail down a formula, you might actually, if you wanted to, you could take your average. So what I did is I got 3 more references, or 3 total references I could use, and those references range from 1.04 to 1.07. So I had a 1.04, a 1.05, and a 1.07. If I wanted to, I could make an average. Well, actually, I had decided to stick with the 1.05 because I don't go into beyond the hundredths decimal point. So I'm only going back 2 places instead of 3. And I always round up in the rear. When you go to do the math, so you want to check your math to find out how close you were. You go ahead and take the 1.05 and multiply it by the 3.76 for the front half of the grip, and it came back as 1.048. So then I rounded up to the 1.05. That's how I got that. Always round up. Now, this works when you just sit down and do a lot of messing with it. So since the measurements that are going to be the best or the most accurate are in the center, so we're looking at the trigger, and I would say the closest measurement we have to the center is the 1.05, which is the front half of the grip. Take your measurements closest from the center, and that's what I'm going to work with on this one. If you had like a top shot of this gun, which I do have in, like I said, in the photo set that I have for this auction, I have a perfect straight down shot of the top of the gun, straight on, perfectly straight, or perfectly square to the top of the gun. So I can measure from right here. I can measure from right here to right there in the center, and using the 1.05. So here it is. It says it is 0.79. So 0.79, I'll write that down so I don't forget it. And multiply 0.79 multiplied by 1.05 equals. So it's 0.82 inches. So it says it's 0.829, so 0.83 inches. So using the 0.83 inches from a top-down view, since that part of the gun is a perfect circle, from the top-down view, I can use that, the 0.83 inches, as a scaling reference to reference that. So 0.83 would become my master or my reference point for the up straight down shot on the gun, to reference the width of, say, the in the rear parts, the width of the release mechanism, or I wanted to double check the piston rod on top. All those things, you can use that as the reference to scale out a different angle of the gun. Doing that and scaling more and more pieces of the gun, like if you get a perfect shot at the end of the gun and you already have a reference that would help you maybe even fine tune. The more measurements you make, the more you're able to fine tune your overall scaling. And remember, when you're going from photos, like I said, you're plus or minus 10%, plus or minus 10%. It just happens that way. Your reference measurements, the reference measurements that you know are accurate, like this grip, I use this as my reference measurement because I had the grip and I could measure it and use it. The formula is your reference measurement, such as the grip, divided by the measurement of the same item in the picture, and that equals your key. And I always write my keys on the top right hand of my page so I can refer to them. And up here on mine, I have 105, 104, and 107, and I circled the 105 because I decided the 105 I think is the better measurement to use. And then to scale, you use the measurement multiplied by the key, and that gives you your scaled size, and that's plus or minus 20%. How you try and beat Parallax is multiple photos, multiple angles, and actually straight on angles are actually the best. Do not really ever try to scale off of straight on shots. Is the best thing you're going to get. That's why auction houses are so good, because they actually do not angle. They'll do a straight on shot on the end of the barrel or on the back of the receiver or on the top or from the bottom up. And having these straight on shots and you keep kind of focusing towards the middle, you get a general idea how long it is. You can also get a good idea of all your different dimensions with multiple shots. Multiple shots are the best. For recap real quick, the formula is whatever your reference, whether you have a piece or a part on the prop, you already know what size that is, or you can extrapolate. Sometimes you see something on there, it's like, ooh, that washer, that's got to be a washer. That's got like a washer for a 1/4-20 bolt, something like that. That might be, it's all you need. For this little guy right here, our only point of reference for scaling this 3D print was the standard distance for the height of a chair from where your butt sits to the ground, and it's 18 inches. So we scaled this off of an 18-inch from the floor, from the butt to the floor. So the references, the formula, your reference divided by the measurement on your photo equals your key. And then from that point, you take your measurement multiplied by the key, and that is your scaled size. And remember, -10 or +10%. That's kind of the range you're working in. If it feels too big, it might be. Also, don't ever be afraid to use your own intuition on this feels right, or is this. Lots of times when you're really intimately working with something, you know when it's off. And always go ahead and take a break. And you know what? Sit it on the table and look at it. Walk around. Put it in your hand, look at it. You'll be able to figure it out. To be honest, photo scaling and screen capture scaling is going to get you within 20% ±10. That's the ballpark you're going to be in, and then it's up to you to adjust and figure out what works best. Sometimes you might just find that you've got the perfect screw to hold the grip on, and you're going to scale off that stupid screw. You can do that. When you're scaling like a helmet and you don't have a point of reference because it's a totally made thing, then you scale it off of what you have, and that is your face. If you have, like I said, I scaled an X-Wing helmet off the position of the character's eyes. I measured my eyes and I measured his eyes, and then I used the distance between my eyes, as the reference point to scale the rest of that helmet. There's many ways to do it. The best way to do it is just get out and try. There's plenty of materials you can use, like wood and foam, and to make up mock-ups to say, yeah, I think I got my measurements right. I'm in the ballpark. It could be rough, it could be crude, but as long as you use those measurements and then put it in your hand and hold it and say, yeah, this feels right, then you can go on to refining that process. Next week, we will actually be doing a 3D print scaling. We're going to take everything we learned tonight and we're going to apply it to a 3D printed model. And then on top of that, we're also going to add on some other scaling techniques that are actually affordable within everyone's range and easy to do. Sometimes it just takes a little bit of searching to find the equipment, but most of the time you can find the equipment broken in your area for a couple dollars, and a guy like this guy can fix it for about $10. Good night, everybody.
Night, everybody.